All right, let's dive into a historical puzzle that has been debated for centuries. It's all about one man, a companion of the Prophet Muhammad named Abu Huraira, and one really, really big number. The question is, how on earth could one person, in just a handful of years, be the source for over 5,000 traditions, or hadith? It sounds impossible, so let's deconstruct it.
Here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll lay out the big question itself. Then we'll get into a crucial piece of terminology. This is the key that unlocks everything. After that, we'll do a statistical deep dive, figure out what the real number is, and then explore why Abu Huraira was in such a unique position to begin with. And finally, we'll look at what might be the real reason he's been such a focus of criticism.
So, let's get right to the heart of it. For many people, both historically and today, the idea of one person narrating thousands of traditions seems like a totally impossible feat.
I mean, really think about this question. Abu Huraira was with the Prophet for a relatively short time, just a few years before the Prophet passed away. So how did he become the main source for this enormous, almost unbelievable number of narrations? You can see why, to a lot of people, it just doesn't add up.
And look, this isn't some new internet controversy. This idea has deep roots. Here's a quote from Ignaz Goldziher, a really famous Orientalist scholar from the 19th century. He looked at that huge number and came to a pretty direct conclusion. A whole bunch of these must have been fake, forged in Abu Huraira's name. And that view has been incredibly influential ever since.
Let's just put that number up on the screen. 5,374. Just let that sink in. It's a massive figure. And it's pretty easy to see why it would raise so many red flags and become the central pillar of the argument against his reliability. Okay, but what if this entire firestorm is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? The sources we're looking at today argue that the answer isn't about the man, but about the methodology. It all comes down to the very specific, technical language used in the science of hadith. And this is where the whole story starts to flip.
Now this, right here, is the absolute key to the whole puzzle. Critics hear 5,374 narrations, and they assume that means Abu Huraira claimed to have personally heard 5,374 times different unique sayings. But in hadith science, there's a huge difference between saying you heard something directly and something being narrated from you. Narrated from counts every single chain of transmission. So think of it like this. If Abu Huraira told 10 of his students the exact same hadith, and they all passed it on, that counts as 10 narrations in the big total, even though the original text is just one. So that giant number, it's counting the pathways, not the unique content.
So, now that we have that methodological key, we can start to peel back the layers of that big number. And thanks to modern computer-aided analysis, we can do this with a level of precision that just wasn't possible before.
Okay, now check this out. Once you have a computer, sift through the 9 major hadith collections and remove all the repetitions, all the different chains for the exact same story. That huge number of 5,374 completely collapses. It drops way, way down to 1,579. Let that sink in for a second. Simply by understanding the terminology correctly, we've already slashed the number at the center of the debate by more than 2/3. We're not talking about 5,000 unique sayings anymore. We're talking about 1,579. But you know what? We're not even done yet. Right? Because even that smaller number doesn't tell the whole story. The next logical question is, okay, of those 1,579 distinct hadiths, how many did Abu Huraira narrate all by himself? How many of them do we only know about because of him? This chart is just fascinating. When researchers dug into those 1,579 hadiths, they found something incredible. The vast, vast majority of them were also narrated by other companions of the Prophet. This is a huge deal because it means the actual content was widely known and transmitted through multiple independent people, which, if anything, makes them seem more reliable. The part that Abu Huraira narrated completely on his own, well, it's just that tiny, tiny sliver right there. And here it is. The final number. According to this research, when you look at all 9 major collections of hadith, the number of distinct traditions that Abu Huraira is the only companion to have narrated is just 110. 110. From over 5,000 down to 110. I mean, that just completely changes the conversation, doesn't it?
Okay, so this brings up another obvious question. If the number of truly unique narrations is that small, why does his name still show up on so many hadith? Why is he still famous for being the most prolific narrator? Well, the answer isn't in the numbers, it's in his life story.
And honestly, who better to answer than Abu Huraira himself? He explained his situation with total clarity. He says, look, I was a poor guy. I stuck close to the Prophet. I wasn't a rich merchant busy in the market. I wasn't a farmer busy with my land. My main job, my whole focus was learning.
So basically, what some might have seen as a disadvantage, his poverty, actually became his greatest scholarly advantage. He was one of the Ahl el-Sufa, the people of the bench, who literally lived in the Prophet's mosque. He was there constantly, soaking up knowledge, while others were, busy with their lives and businesses. He dedicated himself completely to this mission. And on top of all that, Islamic tradition says he received a special prayer from the Prophet for a strong, unfailing memory.
So, if the numbers are so easily explainable and his life story makes sense, why has the criticism been so loud and persistent for so long? To understand that, we kind of have to zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
Just take a look at this table. Yes, Abu Huraira is at the top of the list, no question. But look who else is up there. Other major, highly respected companions like Abdullah ibn Umar, Anas ibn Malik, and Aisha, the Prophet's wife. They all have narrations in the thousands too. So it really makes you wonder, why is Abu Huraira the one who always gets singled out?
The conclusion that this analysis points to is that this might be a strategic move. The argument goes like this: if you can successfully discredit the single most prolific narrator, you can cast a shadow of doubt over a massive chunk of the Sunnah, the entire recorded tradition of the Prophet. It's like taking a swing at the main support pillar in an effort to bring down the whole building.
And really, that brings us to the biggest takeaway. This whole case isn't really about a grand conspiracy. It's about methodology. If you just take the number at face value, you get one story. But if you take a moment to understand the context and the specific methods used, you get a completely different and much more nuanced picture. It leaves us with a question that's way bigger than just this one topic. How often do we jump to conclusions without actually understanding the rules of the game? What other historical puzzles could be solved, not with new evidence, but just by learning how to read the data correctly?